A few years ago, I was working in television. Nothing special, just local stuff. And I came across the Nickelodeon Writers Program. In short, the Nickelodeon Writers Program is when Nickelodeon accepts open submissions for scripts for a limited time out of the year. Now, if you're only interested in elongated story short, I submitted a script, it was not accepted, there you go. But there is more to be said. Let's back up a bit. The Nickelodeon Writers Program was started in 2000, and since then, once a year, the program puts out a call for open submissions, and this window lasted 2 months back when I did it, January and February, but last year in 2022, it lasted only one, July. Those who are accepted into the program are contacted in December. If one is selected, it sounds like it would be quite an exciting program. You'd be hired on for a year, and your job would be to learn the trade of writing for animation. Those working in the program are provided with hands-on training and unique learning experiences. Also, you can lead the next wave of writers at Nickelodeon and animation at large. I was not one of those selected. That being said, I do believe I had something of a unique experience. In Spongebob SquarePants, there's this slight continuity error? Or at least a not formally explained discrepancy regarding sponges. SpongeBob is depicted as square, whereas most other sponges are depicted as round. I don't think it's ever been directly addressed in the series, but it is at least portrayed consistently. SpongeBob is a young man and is square, and all the other sponges I saw are his older relatives, who were round. And I didn't know this at the time, but his similar in age cousin is also square, and his mother had a square baby bump, despite being a sponge. So it looked like then, and it looks even more so now, that sponges are born square and round with age. So I wrote an entire story around this idea, where we're introduced to SpongeBob's brother, Richard, who is prematurely rounding. And the entire point of the story was to utter the phrase, "You're prematurely rounding," which would indirectly introduce the idea that sponges round with age into canon. That was the whole point of the story. Keep that in mind for later. So, I had my premise. SpongeBob had a brother who was rounding. This would imply he's either older or, more interestingly, the responsible one, regardless of whether he's older or younger. Richard works for a rival, bigger, and more powerful restaurant chain, and wants to acquire the Krusty Krab. It becomes apparent that his personal motivation for this is his dissatisfaction with SpongeBob, thinking he should be amounting to more than a minimally paid fry cook for Mr. Krabs. However, SpongeBob talks him out of the whole thing by letting Richard know how happy he is, and that his job at the Krab fuels his very happy personal life. At one point, he compares himself to Richard, who has no life outside of work, and is, quote, prematurely rounding. This, admittedly, wasn't enough to fill an episode, so I included a B-plot involving Plankton getting distracted on his way to his usual shenanigans. This is where I hit a snag. I was under the distinct impression that the Nickelodeon Writers Program wanted scripts for a whole episode. SpongeBob SquarePants, uniquely, comes in 2 stories to an episode. So I thought I needed another script. So I decided to have a whole new story introducing Richard. I had Squidward finding the Krusty Krab unexpectedly closed one day, and so instead goes to a museum, where he encounters Richard. The two hit it off and get into hijinks. When they both leave for work, Squidward realizes that they're going to the same place, and that his new friend is the reason the Krab is closed. Point being, I ended up with 2 scripts. 2 scripts, 1 episode of SpongeBob. The year I submitted, I believe it was 2015, turned out to be the last year they had submissions physically mailed to their location in California. Sometime later, I was contacted, which, as I said earlier, can be a rare occurrence for those who submit. It wasn't to inform me of being selected for the program. I didn't think it was far too early for that. Instead, it was to inform me that my extra effort was unnecessary. They only wanted one script, not a whole episode, and offered to mail me one back. I told them to mail back the first script, as in the one I wrote first. Which means yes, ironically, with the reference to premature rounding, which, if you remember, was the entire foundation of this whole endeavor. I told them to keep the improvised at the last second museum script because I thought it was stronger. I still do, actually. Which is how I ended up with this. A padded manila envelope addressed to me from Nickelodeon, containing a never-produced Spongebob SquarePants script that touched the desk of and had been in the hands of some real Nickelodeon executive, maybe even an actual producer. A script that I wrote with my name on it. It isn't much, and in the grand scheme of things, it's probably nothing. To those who were selected that year, it may even be mundane, and for the many people who work at Nickelodeon, it probably is mundane. But this one is mine. I don't remember if it came at the same time, or if it came later, but I also received a very nice rejection letter from Nickelodeon, thanking me for my time and effort, and encouraging me to submit again next year. I intended to. But the next year brought some changes to the program. I had already mentioned how they switched to digital submission, and that this is when that happened. But also new to this year was a list of accepted programs that submissions had to be written for. This hadn't existed the year before. I had assumed they wanted submissions written for their programs. They did not. Spongebob was not on the list. But Archer, of all things, was. I tried writing an episode for Archer, but I'll be the first to tell you that I don't think it was very good. I never heard back. No return script, no thank you or rejection letter, which was fine. Like I said, it wasn't very good. I just wanted to submit something. Especially considering they sent me a letter asking me to. But that got me wondering about that letter. The script being mailed back to me was them being courteous. But the letter just arrived of its own volition. Maybe my script actually survived fairly far into the process. I suppose them keeping the one script when they sent the other back indicates it at least survived whatever initial quality control measures they have. I can't imagine they go to the lengths of sending everyone who submitted encouraging rejection letters. It might be generous to call this lost SpongeBob media, but like I said, it was on Nickelodeon's desk, and they thought about it, to some degree. Going up with this video, if I remember, I will also upload the unedited script to archive.org. And if people seem interested, I'll do the same thing to the rejected script, although that one's connection to actual SpongeBob is even more tenuous. I said I wrote a real episode of SpongeBob and failed, and I kind of lied on both regards. It would be generous to call it a real episode of SpongeBob, but I also don't think I entirely failed. Like any good episode of SpongeBob, I had a lot of fun with it, and it's still bringing me some enjoyment to this day, and hopefully it'll bring some to you as well. Also, while editing this video, I found out about normal Spongebob. Yeah, that seems about right.